curious how for you find balance between the outrage, the action or activism, and the regular practice of bringing yourself present, and how do you hold those together?
Well, for people who know me, my political activism goes back to when I was a graduate student at MIT during the Vietnam War. So it goes back to 1965 at least, or antedates that. I mean, 1963 actually. I mean, I went on my first anti-war demonstration in New York City. I think the first anti-war demonstration against the Vietnam War in May of 1964. And I knew the person who had organized it because he was actually a sophomore at the college that I was going to. And he got Bertrand Russell to connect with him, and together they put on this first. So,
56 years.
and then there was the civil rights before that. So so an interesting thing. And MIT, where I was a graduate student, was involved in developing all the laser-guided smart weapons and nuclear missile guidance systems that can, basically put a nuclear bomb down a chimney half the world away. I knew the people who developed those guidance systems and the weapons. And so this has been a part of my life from really very early on, to actually include that in the actuality of taking our seat and apprehending the totality of what's going on, because it's all about suffering. And suffering, those are forms of suffering. Creating weapons of mass destruction is a form of delusion, it's a form of suffering. It's like, I know if we don't do it, they do it, then, we gotta at least, have nuclear deterrence and all of that stuff. But the amount of pain and suffering associated with that is enduring. And what's lost in terms of revenue that could be spent educating children, building new hospitals, taking care of poverty once and for all in the society, eliminating racism. So it's always been this way. There's always been injustice. Slavery goes back 400 years. And then there's the genocide before that. So this has always been. So people don't know this, although I've written about it a little bit, but MBSR was actually an outgrowth of something that one of the faculty members at MIT said about us activist students complaining, why don't you ever do anything creative? All you want to do is destroy what we've done. Because they were worried we were going to burn down the place. Mm-hmm. And believe me, there were people at MIT that were prepared to burn down the place, which didn't seem like that was such a sensible thing to do. Because, so I started actually meditating on what I could do to respond to that. And MBSR was the outcome of that, to do something that would be an offering to the world that would actually move the bell curve of humanity. And public health was the place I decided to start in medicine, okay? Can we take people falling through the cracks of the healthcare system and challenge them to do something for themselves that their doctor and no one else on the planet can do for them, and move towards greater levels of health and well-being? And we'll research it to make sure that it's not just blah, 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 but we're actually testing it and seeing whether it does influence mental health, physical health, social health. And that was 40 plus years ago. And it does. We have enough science to be able to assert that quite effectively. And it's still in its infancy. So there was never any separation between the activist Jon Kabat-Zinn and the meditator Jon Kabat-Zinn. There never was. And I've experienced some pretty intense moments of encountering the police myself. I mean, I got the crap beat out of me. Anybody who wants to research it can find it in the newspapers, so including in the UK not that long ago. So I'm not focusing on this, but in the Cambridge police station, in the back room, I mean, they just beat the living daylights out of me to the point where I had to pretend to lose consciousness because I realized they were actually going to kill me. So I had, even though I'm a nice white, boy from MIT, I mean, it didn't matter once they got triggered. And
Wow.
and I realized that kind of the police brutality is unimaginable for people who don't have any privilege. I saw that because I had like all this privilege. I mean, like Cambridge police know not to beat up MIT students, but because it was the Cambodian invasion, the Vietnam War, and all this stuff, it got kind of, you know, smeared, a little bit mixed up. But for people who don't have that kind of white skin privilege or, the support of educational institutions or family or anything like that. So the fact that now that's back after the 60s, after the violence of the 60s and, the murder of Martin Luther King and all of this stuff where they were, the cities were being burned down. And now all of a sudden it's back in a way that is so much more distributive across the population that, white people are not going to stand for this anymore. Moms against violence, in places like Portland, and you see the sort of fascistic kinds of, things that the state are trying to do. It's like, that's in the United States of America today. And the jury is still out about how this is going to all unfold between now and November. So there's no separation between meditative awareness, clarity, compassion, kindness, and caring for people who are suffering. And the root causes of institutionalized pain and suffering are colossal. Corporate greed, you can't get justice often, but corporations can get more justice because they treat it as if they have human rights. It's a corporation. It's like that stuff on paper. And the humans, they're murdered if they don't have, you know, if they're in the wrong place at the wrong time, or look the wrong way at somebody, or whatever it is, or have a headlight out, or, I mean, it's all cliched, but it's not cliche when it's happening to you. And it's happening, and it's always happened. It's not new, only maybe it's new for white people in a certain way. Well, that would be mindfulness. Yeah. You woke up to the fact that, hey, people are being murdered and you don't know anything about it because it doesn't concern me. So, what kind of mindfulness would that be? What kind of heartfulness or compassion would that be if it's just all about more for me and whatever else is happening doesn't concern me? That's a very small me. And so the point of the meditation is like, let's look at who me is and who's looking at the who me is. And is the whoever's looking at the who me is that me? Or is it a much larger me? Or is it even a we? Is it like some kind of core human function that we actually share because we're totally interconnected? Totally interconnected. So those are some of the kinds of threads that manage to, sort of inform how I saw the retreat, the mitigation retreat. I didn't actually mean to go into all that detail about my own political activism and experience of that, except to say that it's been there from the very beginning. And I don't think it's avoidable because if you turn away from suffering, institutionalized, systematic suffering, and you're thinking, oh, I'll just be in some kind of enlightened bliss state. The enlightened bliss state you are in is one of total delusion.
Illusion, right, right.